One thing about us humans is that we love to be entertained, whether it's processing a shocking twist in a movie or becoming immersed in the philosophical intricacies of a book. It wouldn't be an understatement to say that media in many ways can change our lives, and anime and manga are no different. A good anime can awaken a deep-rooted source of self-motivation you never knew existed, or even change both your outlook on and way of life altogether. And naturally, after experiencing something that's brought you so much joy and has had such a profound positive effect on you as a person, your first thought would probably be, I have to share this with as many people as possible. And usually this method is successful, but there's this one little series that seems to be met with a great deal of resistance when it gets recommended to others, and that series is One Piece. It's a tale as old as time that you've all heard, and a massive meme at this point, that One Piece fans will try and get just about anything with eyes to buckle down and start the journey. Their approach is so persistent that the community is often compared to members of Jehovah's Witness. Yes, I am included in that, but it's for good reason. Fans of One Piece can attest to just how brilliant of a work it is, including just about everything you could want out of a good story. Ever-expanding lore, excellent character writing, intense fight scenes, and immersive world building are just some of the qualities that you can expect out of the series. Which begs the question, why can't you get anyone you know to start it? They've watched and read other series you've recommended, but something about One Piece pushes people away. In an age where anime is more popular than ever, why are people so reluctant to watch the most popular anime ever? As a massive fan of this series myself, who has successfully converted dozens of former non-believers into current Straw Hats, I believe I've identified the core reasons as to why people refuse to give One Piece a real chance, as well as the most effective method to convince people to finally start it. This is why your friends won't start One Piece. And if you're interested in watching more One Piece or anime related videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of cool stuff coming on the way. To start things off, not even going to beat around the bush with you guys. We are going to first and foremost address the mountain-sized Yonko level elephant in the room. The number one reason people give you for not wanting to start One Piece is it's too long. I swear if I had $1 for every time someone told me it was too long, I'd be the next Jeff Bezos. I'd literally be a celestial dragon. And while it may be disheartening to hear as a fan, they're not wrong. Over the course of nearly 30 years, Ichiro Oda and his staff have put their blood, sweat, and tears into over 1,100 chapters of the manga that were adapted by Toei Animation into over 21 seasons of the anime. It would simply be ignorant to view One Piece as just as long as most other anime, when in reality it is a pretty sizable undertaking. But my issue doesn't stem from the statement itself, it stems from people's actions despite of it. Meaning if you're simply not into long-running series, I have no problem with that. You and One Piece might simply be fundamentally incompatible, but I've seen on numerous occasions people who are fans of certain series that happen to also be ridiculously long try and use the too long excuse on One Piece, and guys, it just doesn't work. Let's look at Naruto for example. As a fellow member of Shonen Jump's Big Three, Naruto is a global phenomenon that not only took the world by storm, but was a massive hit in the West. In early 2000s America, anime still wasn't quite as mainstream as it is today, but Naruto was able to cut through the stigma of anime being weird or simply just for kids, and became a household staple comparable to the likes of Dragon Ball. This context is important as for a number of reasons, One Piece never truly caught on as strongly in the West compared to the rest of the world, hence as to why you seemingly run into more Naruto fans than One Piece fans. But it astonishes me the number of Naruto fans who have declined starting One Piece to me because they think it's too long, when the reality is Naruto is not too far off. Over the course of almost 20 years, the Naruto manga ran for 700 chapters and had 2 anime series that ran for 220 and 500 episodes respectively. By the time Naruto ended, One Piece was only on chapter 766 and episode 669. And not only that, Boruto, a sequel to Naruto, was started not long after its completion that currently spans 2 manga series that are respectively 80 and 20 plus chapters long at the time of writing this. These are monthly chapters by the way, and an anime with 293 episodes. All in all, if one wants to get into Naruto, they're faced with over 800 plus episodes and or chapters of material to experience. And this isn't a slight on the series, I love Naruto. I'm just trying to prove a point here. You mean to tell me that if Naruto had continued until today, everyone would have just dropped it? Of course not. so it's not an excuse that should be used against One Piece. Nobody invests that much time into a series that wouldn't invest that much more. Dragon Ball as well. From OG to Super, we're looking at over 600 plus chapters of the manga and almost 600 episodes of the anime, which jumps even further when you include GT and Daima. And these are just the most popular examples of long-running series that never really get the too long treatment despite not being that far off of One Piece. Additionally, One Piece's length, I would argue, is the story's biggest benefit, not its detriment. One Piece is a story that is renowned for its world building, and the best way for a series to showcase how strong its world building is to actually have you live in that world. The first saga of One Piece takes place in the East Blue, a relatively tame area of the seas compared to the Grand Line. And it's being able to experience the four blues firsthand for as long as we do that makes it so much more special once we finally enter the Grand Line. You get to hear stories about it, meet characters from it, and allow yourself to actually be hyped to visit there, so once you actually get there, it feels like a huge payoff. And that's the best way to describe One Piece. It's an investment. You may not feel like the first arc is the greatest thing you've ever read, but I promise if you continue on, you're going to have your socks blown off, and it's going to hit even harder because of how much time you spent within this world with all of these characters. Heck, there's even reveals in the recent arcs that are callbacks to the very first chapter. Also, I've seen Daniel Green compare early One Piece to the Shire portion of Lord of the Rings, and I think this is a great comparison. Of course, nothing earth-shattering has happened yet, they're still in the beginning of their journey. If you check out chapter 100 of any respective manga, undoubtedly they're in the middle of some world-altering conflict, as most series only last about 300 chapters on average. But for One Piece, who's in it for the long haul, chapter 100 is where things are just getting started. It also doesn't help that in terms of the anime, we live in an age where all the popular anime nowadays are released seasonally, so people can actually miss their favorite series and be that more excited when it's time for it to come back. Although One Piece does take its occasional breaks. Weekly anime series certainly aren't the norm anymore, and while some are still around, they're definitely a part of a previous era. And while length is certainly a large factor in people avoiding starting One Piece, I found that it's the length on top of other things that keep people from starting One Piece. Next, we'll be addressing a reason that's certainly less common than length, but is one that still gets brought up fairly often, and that is the animation and art style of the series. And yeah, One Piece's art style is certainly different. When you start to compare One Piece to other anime, you'll notice that One Piece's art style doesn't quite have what you'd call the traditional anime look. Most anime tend to use very thin, sharp lines to outline their characters, in addition to smaller, more striking shaped eyes, spiky hairstyles, and tend to opt for an overall less vibrant approach to color. One Piece, on the other hand, is full of bright, vibrant colors, featuring characters of extremely non-traditional character designs, including larger, more rounded eyes, large mouths, and less anatomically accurate proportions. Characters also tend to be designed with bold curved lines, all in all creating an aesthetic appearance that some may say is reminiscent of a show for children. But there's certainly a reason for this. One Piece's art style has certainly changed over the course of almost 3 decades, but has retained its core look. Having a unique art style is crucial for a series to stand out and become recognizable just at a glance. And Oda has confirmed himself this was part of his process for developing One Piece's art style. That's why I can show you this drawing an artist made of their family, and you instantly recognize it as Family Guy's art style despite them never appearing on the show. Oda is also one of the greatest character artists I've ever seen when it comes to expressing emotion, and it's because of the exaggerated proportions of the character's eyes and facial features that create such a dramatic effect. This artistic decision also enhances both dramatic and comedic moments simultaneously, as the designs lend well to the slapstick comedy the series is known for, in addition to the drastic contrast it creates when you see a character like Luffy or Usopp get serious. Think Kirby and Sonic box arts when they were released in the West. Now onto animation. One Piece is certainly a product of its time, as its anime debuted back in 1999. So we're already dealing with the kind of classic aesthetic that many modern anime fans are averse to, coupled with the fact that early One Piece isn't the most over-the-top action-wise. It leaves potential new viewers who are spoiled by the Mappa and ufotable greatness feeling rather unimpressed. For example, take a look at the kind of fights you can expect to see from, say, the first 30 episodes of either Jujutsu Kaisen or Demon Slayer. Some insane stuff, right? Now let's check out what you can expect from about the first 30 episodes of One Piece. And as you can see, it's still really good for its time, especially when you consider this was way back when One Piece anime was still done by hand. But it's hard to sell this to someone who almost exclusively watches anime with modern levels of animation. And though it may not be fair to compare due to those anime being modern seasonal shows with years of work put into them, many fans don't see things that way. Personally, I appreciate anime of all time periods, but hey, that's just me. And I'm not asking people to treat One Piece any differently, but context is important. Even when compared to other weekly anime from its time period, the first 100 episodes of Naruto and Bleach feature more exhilarating action sequences than One Piece. But the important thing to note is that this only applies to the very beginning of One Piece, and it's like this for a few reasons. I'm sure you've seen the clips of the crazy animation that One Piece is known for now, and it genuinely rivals or even surpasses a lot of the seasonal series out today. This represents Luffy and the main characters finally reaching the point where they can duke it out with the top tiers of their verse, so that is illustrated with flashy auras, crazy impact frames, and surreal animation. Advanced Haki and Devil Fruit Awakenings are the norm at this stage in the series, which calls for far more intense fight scenes. Earlier One Piece feels much more lax, well, because it is. Nobody in the East Blue was using Haki yet. Nobody in the Four Blues even believes Devil Fruits exist, which is why it was such a big deal when we rarely encountered one. Techniques such as Soru haven't been formally introduced yet, which is what enables a lot of characters to do that universal anime vanish move. And lastly, the power-ups. A shonen staple of characters unlocking new abilities that display immense progression and increases the tension tenfold are typically very prominent within the earlier parts of the story. Ichigo uses Bankai in episode 58, Naruto uses Nine-Tails Chakra in episode 17, Luffy doesn't reveal Gear's second until episode 272, but like everything else when it comes to One Piece, there's a reason behind it. Up until that point, he never really needed a power-up. Every opponent Luffy faced up until this point, he either was already stronger than, or was able to exploit some glaring weakness. This was the first time Luffy's strength was called into question, and the first time he felt like he couldn't protect his crew if he did not become stronger. It's because of all the previous interactions that we can gauge the type of person and fighter that Luffy is, so that when he finally does display a power-up, it has so much more narrative relevance as well as satisfaction in the reveal of said ability. It's not an ass pull, but a natural stepping stone to reach the next level. So watching the gradual uptick in animation quality from the more tame fights at the very beginning to the high intensity spectacles that we're fortunate to have now just adds to the character's notable progression throughout the series. And I promise, after watching something like Luffy vs Kaido, you will appreciate a fight like Luffy vs Arlong even more. Lastly, we're going to be discussing the final reason why many people refuse to start One Piece, and that is the tone of the series. And the lesser known but most damning culprit behind this issue is none other than 4Kids. 4Kids Entertainment was a licensing company that was responsible for dubbing and airing English versions of popular anime such as Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and what do you know, One Piece. Now the original One Piece series is already known for having a generally lighthearted vibe most of the time until things get serious, but 4Kids took things over the top. I mean, we reached levels of censorship that we didn't even think was possible. Guns were turned into squirt guns, bullets were turned into suction cups, nobody could be killed, only sent to the dungeon, and then we have the infamous cigarette to lollipop change. One Piece's usual lighthearted tone never felt unserious, as mature themes and events would always occur to remind the viewer that this isn't La La Land. There's blood and gore, adult language, and people die all the time. 4Kids essentially removed all of that, even going as far as changing Smoker's name to Chaser, removing his cigars, and changing his Smoke Devil Fruit into the Steam Fruit. And with this version of the series being the first impression of One Piece to millions of kids throughout America, many of them grew up not taking One Piece seriously, and frankly, they've never recovered. The Funimation dub airing on Toonami definitely helped a bit, but by then the damage had already been done, and I'm not blaming 4Kids at all. I love what they did for the anime community, and they were a massive part of my childhood, but when you could easily change the channel and enjoy something much more gritty such as Naruto or Dragon Ball, can't really blame lots of kids. It's also important to note that as One Piece has went on, they've touched very dark and serious themes throughout the story, such as slavery, human experimentation, and some themes that you would typically only expect from a seinen manga. Kudos to Oda's writing for being able to skillfully and respectfully address such themes in his story in a realistic manner, while also not turning into an entirely different manga. So we've gone over what I believe are the core reasons as to why so many of your friends won't start One Piece. They feel it's too long, they don't like the art style, and they're not a fan of the tone. And while no one's opinion is ever invalid, I like to think I presented a great case to alleviate a lot of the concerns that people have over starting One Piece. So now that you understand why they won't start One Piece, here is the most effective method to get them to start One Piece. I promise it can work, as this is the exact method I've used to get people aboard with the idea. Number 1, be calculated and consistent, not random and persistent. After you've already recommended the series to them a couple of times and they still haven't started it, don't keep forcing it down their throat like Mr. Krabs' pill. Rather, whenever people bring up qualities they like about other series they've watched, use that opportunity to express how One Piece does that just as well, if not better. Dude, I love Hunter x Hunter's world building. I can't wait to get to the Dark Continent. For real, man, by the way, One Piece captures the same vibe of the Dark Continent with the New World, and they spent about half the series there. You should check it out. Or, hey, I know how much you love Bleach's Soul Society arc. If you're looking for something similar, One Piece's Enies Lobby arc is amazing and has a similar premise. Be smart about it. And if anyone tries to bring up any of the previously mentioned reasons, here's how to handle it. If they say that One Piece is too long for them, first you have to identify whether they're the type of person who even watches long-running anime or not. If they are, you hit them with this. It's really not that long compared to other anime you've watched. I know you're a big Naruto fan, and if you add up all the episodes, it's around the 800 mark. By the time you reach that point in One Piece, you'll already be hooked and you'll be wishing that it was even longer. If they're not the type of person that usually watches long anime, I always start off by asking them how long are the anime they usually watch, and it's usually between about 24 to 50 episodes. And I'll just say, okay, just watch that much of One Piece. If you like it, keep watching. If you don't, then drop it. Simple as it is, I've gotten it to work a lot. If they still won't budge after that, I put the math on them. Okay, so the manga is 1150-ish chapters long, so if you read about 10 chapters a day, you'd be caught up in like 4 months. That's like a semester of college. Really puts things into perspective for them. If they're not digging the art style, well, that's really just a point of personal preference, but I always mention that One Piece's art style complements the story it's telling so well that it truly wouldn't be the same series with a more traditional anime art style. It allows for the freedom of character expression and assists in both character interaction as well as their fighting styles. If they feel the tone doesn't match what they're looking for, explain how their perception of the series likely stems from a heavily censored version of the series they watched when they were a little kid, and how in reality it's nothing like that. Lots of seinen and novel readers make One Piece one of their only exceptions to reading outside of that realm due to the nature of the issues and themes that the story addresses, such as classism and philosophical questions such as whether or not one should have been born. Number 2, be patient. Like I mentioned earlier, One Piece is a big commitment. So even after you get that, yeah, I'll check it out, it could be a while before they actually start that first chapter or episode. I know that when I decided that I wanted to get into One Piece, it took me a few months before I actually started it. I waited until my schedule was clear to where I could dedicate the time to it that it truly deserved. It's perfect for summer vacations or long travel times. Number 3, keep them excited without totally spoiling them. If there's a crazy fight happening, try and let your friends know about it without giving too much away. You kind of want to keep people on the edge of their seats to the point where they'll want to experience it for themselves. I had a friend who was so hyped about what was going on in Wano that they just started reading from there, and while that's not my recommended way to get into One Piece, they ended up falling in love with it and went back and read all the way from chapter 1. And speaking of recommended ways to get into the series, keep it plain and simple and go with the original manga or the original anime. The usual route I see new fans go is they watch the anime until they catch up, and they usually either incorporate or switch to the manga altogether. I know very few anime only One Piece fans, but be very careful when suggesting alternatives such as the episode of specials and One Piece, as I do not feel these are the ideal way to experience the series on the first way through. The episode of specials are great condensed versions of sagas with updated animation, but largely focus on the main plot points and lose other important details. great for a quick rewatch. One Piece is a fan-edited alternative to One Piece that aims to fix the pacing issue, similar to Dragon Ball Z Kai. And while I think it's very well made, I wouldn't suggest it for your first time watching it. Enjoy One Piece for what it is, and if you want to rewatch someday, One Piece is perfect for that. Additionally, a full-scale remake of the One Piece anime helmed by Studio Wit is in the works that is planned to feature modern animation as well as more uniform pacing, and while the director has been quoted stating that he'd like to cover as much of the series as possible, it's unclear how much of the story will be adapted or even when it'll be released. And unfortunately, probably can't expect the original cast to return, which just may be the most charming group of voice actors ever assembled. So as I was editing this video, news came out that was too important to not add in. So Toei Animation has announced that they're changing the One Piece anime schedule from weekly to seasonal, releasing in 2 cours a year at a total maximum of 26 episodes a year. They stated that their goals are to improve animation, naturalize the pacing, and to include more detail from the manga, and most importantly, they should hopefully give the anime staff more of a break. While this means almost nothing to people who haven't started yet, over time it will technically make it easier to catch up to. Okay, post-production tidbit over. So to review, I have detailed and hopefully debunked the most common reasons as to why many people won't start One Piece, as well as provide my own method for how I've been able to get so many people into One Piece. Do I believe it can work? Yes. Can I guarantee a 100% success rate? Hell no. I'm not a genie, but I do think you'll eventually find yourself around a lot more One Piece fans if you put these steps into action. And if you don't even feel like putting the footwork in, just send them this video. And just as a personal heads up, One Piece isn't getting any shorter. And if you continue to put it off, one day you're gonna look up and the One Piece is going to be revealed and there's no way you're gonna be able to avoid it. So do yourself a favor and make sure your future self does not get spoiled. All in all, y'all have yourselves a good one. Alright, I just want to say thanks for watching, guys. Thank you for sticking through with me for yet another video. A little different than, the kind of videos I usually like to make on this channel. But, being a One Piece fan, part of it is like trying to get other people into One Piece. And I feel like nobody's really tackled that in an organized, constructive way. You always just see memes about it. But I thought it was a cool idea. I don't want to come across that One Piece is like this. I don't want to come off as a Rick and Morty fan or something like that. I completely get it. If you don't want to get into One Piece, it's fine. I just want it to be because it's just not of your personal interest and not because of things that seem rather intimidating. You know what I mean? In terms of length and stuff like that. But yeah, I also just want to say thank you to everyone who's stuck with me for the the duration of the channel's life. As I'm recording this, we are at a little over 1,300 subscribers and over 160k views. The channel is now currently monetized, and I just feel so thankful, dude. When I made that first video, when I decided I wanted to start doing YouTube, I know it's a cliche thing that everybody says, but dude, I really didn't even think that I would be able to get to this point. And I have so much fun doing it. I love making videos and just interacting on YouTube so much that I'm optimistic about how much further we can go, dude. It's just amazing, dude. Like streaming, when people come into the chat and people leave comments and videos, it's wild, dude. It really is just seeing how much people enjoy what you've done, and the fact that you can interact with them and have this common interest on such a large scale is wild. And I'm very thankful and appreciative for everyone. Also throwing out the idea of potentially maybe simulcasting, kind of similar to what Cole does with the One Piece chapters, maybe streaming on both YouTube and Twitch simultaneously. Maybe even Kick, if I even want to take that route. But yeah, just some ideas. Hope everyone's doing well, and nonetheless, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.